Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Bright Side of Life. I am your host, Melissa Bright, and today we are in conversation with Taneshia Johnson, and she is an associate clinical social worker, a self care coach, and a first time author of the book entitled When Depression and Anxiety Have a Voice. She specializes in emotional self care as well as codependency. So, big reveal. Guess what we're going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about emotional self care and codependency and getting lots of knowledge and self tips from her. So, without further ado, Taneshia, welcome to the bright side of life. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Melissa. I'm doing great. Just so happy to share this conversation with you and everyone. I'm excited.
Yes, me too. And I have to ask, are the storms over? Is it sunny now in California?
So, shockingly enough, it's storming today. Like we had sunshine for Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday was like just off and on rain, and
Right.
today the storm came. But
Oh, jeez.
yeah, we're
Well,
kind of getting tired of the rain
I
here.
I understand. We just had that literally like all last week here in Missouri, and I'm like, okay, I need some sunshine in my life, please. Please. All right. So to get us started, I kind of want to hear a little bit of your backstory of how you kind of got involved in, being a social worker to a self-care coach and why this topic is important to you. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so it was crazy how everything kind of happened. So I was going through moments of like depression, and I didn't really understand what depression was at that time. This was about 10 years ago.
Okay.
But I knew that I just didn't feel like myself. And so I've been a social worker for about 20 years now. And I knew that, moments like this, it's always good to have someone to talk to. So I sought out a therapist. And when I started going to therapy, she did, tell me that I was struggling with depression. She also said that I had like general anxiety disorder. And then she mentioned to me that she felt like my depression was triggered by my codependency. And that
Mm.
was like a foreign term, to me. I was like, codependency was that. The only time I had heard it was related to like people who struggle with alcohol or drugs, like enablers,
Yep. Yep.
like. So I was like, oh no, like no, I'm not codependent. I don't have anybody I'm supporting, through their addiction. And she said, Tanisha, codependency is so much more than that. And that's how the story unraveled. And I went on this just embark of like researching codependency, going to meetings. I was going to codependency anonymous meetings. I ended up completing a 12-step program. I became the facilitator of the program, and it was it was a healing, but also just very lonely journey. And I
Yes.
felt like I didn't have anyone to talk to about what it really was, like in my peer group. Like,
Right.
um, and I just told myself, I said, you know what? This needs to be information that people know about. And I promised God, I said, Lord, if you get me through this, I will tell the world about codependency. And it's just been it's been a exciting journey ever since into being an author. I wrote my book. People were buying my book. I didn't think anybody was going to buy my book except my family and friends.
Right.
People all over were buying my book, and then people started asking me to coach them. So I got
Mhm.
certified as a coach. I was like, okay, God, this is what we're doing. Like, so got certified as a coach about 3 years ago. Um, I felt good doing it because I do it in my 9 to 5. I'm a counselor in my 9 to 5, but I
Right.
still wanted to just get certified and really understand what coaching is all about, so that I don't do a disservice. And
Right.
yeah, so now I'm like TJ self care coach, author, social worker, recovering codependent of 9 years.
That is it. So you're like literally doing everything, and that is amazing. You have accomplished so much in short amount of time. I think it's absolutely awesome what you are doing.
Thank you.
It's so funny that you said the codependent about addiction and like alcoholism, because that's how I came to know codependency. My mom was recovering alcoholic and drug addict. And so I was around the program. I went to meetings with her when I was like a little girl because, well, she didn't have anywhere else
Oh,
to take me.
wow.
And so I would hear her talk about it. You know, there was a book that I used to always read, The Language of Letting Go, which is for, I
Yes.
guess, addiction and alcoholism, but I still could relate to it even as a little girl, but that's where that word came up. So it's so funny that you mentioned that. And now we're going to talk about how codependency is not just for alcoholics, addiction, people that are in relation with these people. So I guess kind of let's start there. It's a good entryway. First of all, what is codependency?
Yeah. So codependency is a cluster of behaviors that we use in order to cope with a traumatic incident that happened in our childhood years. So generally, codependents are people who their caregivers either had a mental health disorder, physical disability, they struggle with drugs or alcohol, or they were just overall a parent who struggled to self-regulate themselves. And so, of course, they couldn't help their child. And as a survival skill, the child will learn how to kind of adapt to whatever the parent needs them to be so that they can be in this relationship with their parent and get their needs met. And the sad part about it is even though it's a great tool to use during traumatic times like that, if it's never addressed and it's never talked about, then we grow up believing that this is how we connect and stay in relationships with people, by caregiving, by putting their needs first, by being very attentive to them, but not really focusing on us. Um, and many of us grow up and we get into these relationships where we're always the one like giving, nurturing, when the parties come, we're the friend that's open arms to plan and, and everything. And all we really want is just to be loved.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. This is going to be a wake up call. So for me. So would you say, and I don't want to yet go there, but is codependency the same as people pleasing?
So in the beginning, I used to say yes. But as I continue on with this work, we're researching and now like talking to so many people, I'm really learning how people pleasing is a behavior that codependents use, but it
Mm,
per se is like it's a separate thing.
okay.
Because there are people that are people pleasers, but they're not necessarily codependents.
Okay.
You know.
Now, if if you don't want to share this, I totally understand. You can just give me other examples, but I'm sure my listeners are like, "Oh my god, am I either in a codependent relationship right now? Have I been in one?" So, what are really some like, I guess, signs or examples of like maybe an everyday you're in a codependent relationship? Like, what would it look like maybe on day-to-day life?
So, like a codependent, so this is the thing about that too, Melissa. So, if we are codependent, we actually make the relationship a codependent relationship.
Oh,
Um,
perfect.
because we don't allow the person to really show up as their authentic self, because we're constantly inputting, trying to help them or make gestures, or we're trying to control certain things that happen in a relationship out of fear, really, so that
Right.
so that we don't get hurt again. And so we kind of turn it into a codependent relationship by doing that, because things become one-sided. And unless you're friends or in an intimate relationship with someone who's really, really self-aware and can communicate that um, to you, like they can communicate like, hey, I noticed that you do more in this area. Let me take over, something like that. But for the most part, people take us at face value. And so they just say, oh, great. Well, Melissa, Taneshia is great. They're always helping. They're always doing this. And if you talk to us, we're like, I feel used. I feel mistreated. This person never thinks about me. It's like it's a whole nother mindset that's happening. It's a whole nother experience happening in the relationship than what the other person is aware of.
Okay. And something else that I forgot to mention. So I have heard of Codependency Anonymous twice now within the last 24 hours, and I never knew that this was a thing. So I'm really curious about that. You said it was a 12-step program, much like AA, and probably, well, also NA. Um, so what are like, if you don't mind me asking, what are some of the steps that you have to do to like this is this a phrase, codependent no more? Do people like say that?
People do, yeah, and it's
Okay.
an amazing book I love too.
Oh, that's a
Yeah,
book. Yes, yes, yes. That's a
yeah,
book. Okay. I'm like,
I've read it
why is
again.
this company? Okay. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay. So yeah, what are some of the steps that people take in that program?
Yeah, so I just love it. So for anybody who's like listening and thinking about it, if you go to coda.org, that's the website where I found my meetings, and
Mm,
you type in your zip code, and it gives you a list of like all the places where meetings are held, like within like a 5, 10, or 20-mile radius of your home.
okay.
And they have two types of meetings. So they have what they call the step meetings, where you work through the 12 steps. And then they have like the open share meetings. The open share meet, I used to go to both. Like, I feel like the best benefit is to go through both if you can, because in the open share, you get to like hear other people's stories. And, Melissa, it was just crazy, like to hear women, men, like it didn't matter. Like all of us were sitting there, like different ethnicities, different like backgrounds, but yet we all were struggling with the same thing. And I was hearing scenarios of like, you know, housewives, that are like, my children run over me, my
Mm,
husband, my wife doesn't listen to me. And I was like, wow, it's like all of us share the same experience. And it was really like a healing moment for me,
right.
that made me feel like I wasn't alone. Um, Whereas, like in the 12 step meetings, like you really don't get to share that much. You're just literally like doing the homework assignments. They give you like a book when you decide that you want to start the program and come out every week, because it's an every week thing.
Yeah.
And you do just like the worksheets, for
Okay.
that week. And then you come in and you talk about your questions. And there's normally like a facilitator there, that opens it up. And it's a really healing experience. Like we read, oh my God, I can't believe the Serenity Prayer. Yeah. We read
Yes.
the Serenity Prayer like after every meeting. And
Yeah.
it really gives you the strength to know, like, I can do this. Like, I can use these new tools to live life.
That is beautiful. And okay, so and not to get into your story too much, or if you're fine with sharing,
Oh yeah,
was
I don't mind.
so okay, can I ask who you were like codependent with? Was this like a partner? Was this a parent? Was this a friend? Or how does that usually work?
Yeah, so for me, it started with my mom. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, my mom, she was a single parent, and she was struggling to just provide for me and take care of me. And she herself, was struggling with a lot of depression, when I
Mhm.
was growing up. And so it just everything that I did as a kid just seemed to really either frustrate her or get on her nerves. And so I learned that if I do everything she says and I'm this quote unquote great daughter, then I don't get yelled at. I don't, like I don't get spankings, anything. And so that kind of became like who I was. I was straight A's, always came home after school, cleaned up the house, cleaned up my room. I was raised by my mom and my aunt, who was my aunt was like 78 when I was born.
Mm.
And so as I got older, she needed more help. So I was cleaning up her diapers and helping her bathe and all these things at literally 11, 12 years old, doing.
Right.
And so that was kind of like the foundation of my codependency. I learned caregiving and not speaking up and minimizing myself very early.
Okay. And then this transpired even more like in your adult relationship with your mom?
Yeah, in my adult
Okay.
relationship, it was similar, and not just with her, but with everybody, it was similar. It's
Yeah.
like I was always that go-to friend, like trying to fix everybody's problems. In my relationship with my partner at the time, he was, fresh out of jail. I was helping him find a job, find,
Mm.
housing, all these basic things that he should be doing for himself. I was inserting myself and doing them, because I was like, well, I'm a social worker and I know all this. And if I'm helping you, like, you won't leave me, because you need me. That whole mindset
Yeah.
behind it.
Okay. So then what would you say if some of my listeners are identifying and saying, this I'm kind of identifying with this. First of all, I want to put, I guess, I always say this to my listeners. When we become aware of these things, this is not something to have judgment on yourself. This is something to just have awareness,
Mm.
get curious about it. You know, this is to help you. This isn't to put another label on you or anything like that. So first of all, I want to say that because I'm definitely like identifying with some codependent stuff for sure. So what would be one of the first steps, like if you, let's just say you're with your partner and you definitely notice you're doing some codependent things, taking care of some stuff, what are some first steps to stop this? To I don't even know how to really like phrase it or how you say to stop or whatever.
Yeah, they kind of like to get the relationship back in like a 50-50 kind of
Yes, thank you.
flow.
Yes. Yep.
Like, no, for sure. No, and so the best thing for us to do is really start to ask ourselves, am I caregiving for my partner or am I in a relationship with my partner? Because a lot of times it starts with us changing our mindset around, well, how do I show up in this relationship? Like, does this person ask me for help or do I just interject, myself into their life? Like, do they talk to me about things and I just give advice? Do I ask them what they like advice? Us learning our role, because like really being in a relationship, right, is about us doing life with that person and experiencing life with that person. But the codependency tells us that we have to do something, like we have to support them, we have to nurture them, and we actually don't have to do any of those things.
Oh,
It shouldn't be like an automatic. We should be asking our partners, wow, it sounds like you had a hard day. What do you need from me right now? Versus our
yeah.
partner tells us they have a hard day and we spend 2 hours cooking a meal, and then they get home and sit on the couch and they zone out on TV, and then we feel neglected and abandoned. And look what I did for you, and all these things. Um,
Yeah.
and I just give that as an example of some of the dynamics that we get into, and then we start to feel abandoned and we start to question a relationship, but really it's us overdoing in the relationship, you know?
Mm. Okay, so then what happens when we start to one like speak up and say, I don't think I want to be this. say you're having this internal conversation with yourself. You haven't yet went to the partner or whoever, but like you don't want to do this anymore. Whatever, what you're really noticing these patterns. I guess I'll just ask the question. How important are boundaries now that we know that we're like codependent? Like what do we do?
Wow, yes, the boundaries are huge. Like having the boundaries, that's the first way we protect ourselves. Honestly, and sometimes we even have to set boundaries within ourselves.
Mm,
Like to tell ourselves, I'm not going to insert myself in other people's problems, or I'm not going to give advice when it's not being asked of me. And of course, having boundaries with other people when people are asking us to do things we don't want to do, just coming out and saying, I can't do it, or I wish you the best with this project, I have something else I'm involved in, or if it's a family member, asking us for money or something like that, being okay with saying no, you
yeah.
know and
Okay.
knowing that you're not being mean by saying no.
Right. And in your experience, how well does this go over with the other person? Like, are they all of a sudden like, Tanisha, you have never told me no before? Like,
Yeah.
did you ever have a wake up call of like, holy crap, this person was taking advantage of me knowingly or not unknowingly? What was your experience when you started to set boundaries?
Yeah, so I got a lot of it was rough in the beginning. It was really rough. I had a lot of narcissistic people in my life that I didn't realize I had. My partner was narcissistic. Some of my friends were narcissistic, and so setting boundaries is almost like repellent, for a narcissist. And so I felt really alone in the beginning of my journey. Everybody was like abandoning me. Um, and then I struggled to set the boundaries, because a big part of setting boundaries is us knowing that we're worthy of setting these boundaries. It's normal to have boundaries, and boundaries keep us safe, you know.
Yep.
And I really had to internalize that. But in the beginning, I was still struggling with, if I set these boundaries, like, will the friends I have left also leave me? You know, what is life going to look like? So I struggled a lot with the boundaries and really had to start off basic, like I was saying no to everything. Uh, that's one of the reasons why people who struggle with codependency and people pleasing, they isolate themselves when they realize what's happening, because it feels easier to be alone, because being with people just it brings on so many emotions, like, should I set the boundary, should I not? And some people don't like to go through it.
Okay, so I have had this like quote twirling around in my head for like the past couple weeks that when I have something in my head that comes up, I will usually put it on Facebook or Instagram. And one of the things was, and it's really hard for me to admit this, but so often we wish that the other person will change for the
Mhm.
simple factor that we aren't comfortable enough or love ourselves enough to set a boundary. Because if we set a boundary and then they don't honor that, then that means that we then have to like maybe leave them because that's no longer honoring ourselves. So it's easier if they could just change. Can't you just change for me? So then I don't have to set this boundary. And then I know you for sure love me, when that's totally bass backwards. Like, you need to set the boundary and see what the hell they do. And
Mhm.
then you're like, oh, okay. But
Yeah.
that's like you said, that's why people isolate, because it's easier to not be disappointed and see all the people that are probably going to walk right out of your life when you set that boundary.
Yeah, it is. Like, it feels easier to just isolate yourself versus like actually be there in the moment, witnessing people leaving or
Mm.
witnessing people disappoint us, because yeah, codependency says, I can change when you do XYZ. right? Versus
Yep.
like a healthy relationship is like, I'm going to take care of myself.
Yeah.
This is what I have to do for me, you know.
Yeah. So then what would you say? I mean, I I can only imagine how many of us have been in a codependent relationship, friendship, what have you. And I just lost my train of thought. But like, what would you say is a healthy balance? Because I guess like I'm thinking of all these moms out here, like stay-at-home moms that are literally doing all the stuff at home. They are doing the cooking, they are doing the cleaning, they are doing taking care of the kids. That is kind of their role, if you will. And then the husband or whoever is out working. But like that's got to be such a hard balance. Do you have do you have an answer for that? Like how do we know balance? How do I know I'm doing the right thing or if I'm being too codependent?
No, that's true. I mean, that's a good question because it is. It's hard for us to decipher, especially when we're like, we don't have a model and we're the
Hmm.
first, we're the first in our family or in our community of people, we love to like make these changes. So the first thing I would say is codependency also, it depends on like if we like it. Like, if you genuinely like staying at home and cooking and cleaning and doing those things, then there's nothing wrong with it
Okay.
because that's like a decision that you and your partner have made together, whether it was non-verbally or verbally, is working well for the both of you. But when there's feelings of resentment and feelings of like, I'm not being supported, I'm not being helped, then that's when it's time to have a conversation. That's when we know, like, okay, I don't feel supported in this. I need to ask my partner to help me with certain things, or I need to tell my partner I need a break, or I need to return back to a flow that feels good for me.
Oh, that is the perfect litmus test. That is perfect. And I'm like just thinking of past relationships and I'm like, "Oh, I genuinely did not like doing all of that shit all the time. No, I genuinely did not like that." And
No,
resentment did come up for sure.
I didn't either. No, well, I
Oh,
like to clean. I don't mind a messy partner because I like to clean, but I don't like to cook and clean.
yeah, right,
That's,
exactly. Yeah,
that's too much.
yes. Okay. Well, in terms of codependency, do you feel like we've kind of covered a lot of like bases? Have we left anything out in terms of like what it is or how we can maybe combat it, do a little bit better? Or is there any last things you want to say about codependency?
Well, we may touch on it later, but because the main thing people always ask me is, well, Tanisha, how do we, how do I quote unquote get rid of it, or how do we heal from it? And my
Hmm.
response is always, we have to emotionally grow up to the same age that we are physically. That's really how you crack the ice. With codependency is we have to emotionally grow up to the 30, 40, 20, 50, 60 year olds adults that we are, because that inner child is running the show, and that's why things feel chaotic. Because when you think about the tools they have, I mean, what do they have? They have people pleasing, minimizing, they have overdoing, hoping that someone sees them, sees how amazing they are, and will come in and help. That's all they have. And so it's like, until we merge with them and say, hey, no one is coming to save us. I'm here. Like, I'm going to save myself. That's how we start to heal.
Okay. I like this. Now, this might be something foreign to my listeners, and I am not in any way trying to bash any of my listeners, but that might be a hard concept to like grasp that like, hey, I'm 37, but Tanisha, you're telling me I'm actually like a 6-year-old or maybe a 12-year-old. Um that might be a little bit like weird to them. So and if I'm diving too deep, let me know. And I've seen it on something else, but like, how can we tell it? Like, what? age we might be if I don't feel 37, because when I have heard it otherwise, I have very much have felt like a little kid. I'm like, I'm 37 years old, but I don't feel like I'm 37 years old. I feel very like something is happening. So can you answer that question?
Yeah, yeah, and it's sometimes it gets a little sticky, but for the most part though, for those of us who really haven't done any level of healing work, like maybe some therapy and and maybe some coaching, but you haven't really like done a lot of it consistently, you're probably like 5 or 6.
Okay. Yep.
Whereas people who've been in therapy for a while, for a couple years, who like go to workshops and read books and stuff, they may be more like teenager, even like late teenager, like 16, 17. I'm 39, but I'm probably 22, 23
Mm.
emotionally. And I say that because some signs I see in myself is I set boundaries, but I notice that I set boundaries and then I'm a little cocky about it in the beginning. And then when I get home, I'll think about it like, oh, well, I wonder maybe I should call them. Was I too rough? you know, and that's when
Yeah.
the 39-year-old has to come in and say, no, you are not mean. You are not rough. They will be okay. If they were upset, it was their responsibility to tell you they were upset. You shouldn't be trying to guess that and then apologizing based on what you assume.
Mm. And I can imagine. So I don't have my parents anymore. They have passed
Oh,
away.
I'm
But
sorry, Melissa.
thank you. I think for me, a lot of this healing like could probably take place with them. Like if I had to set boundaries with my mom now or my dad now, like what would that look like, and would that get me to a place like older, I guess, if you will? Like would it
Right,
get me to 37 now if I could be like, okay, how would I interact with my parents now, and what kind of boundaries would I have with them, so on and so forth, and not be codependent, and so on and so forth. So it's very interesting because I don't have that litmus test, obviously. There's other
right.
people I could do it to, and it could probably be different for each relationship.
Yeah.
Um, man,
Yeah, I'm very similar too.
it's
Like Melissa, my father passed away in 2019, and I had just started to get to a level of telling him how I felt and trying to change telling him the type of relationship I wanted.
yeah. Yeah, and I'm sorry it broke up a little bit. The internet was just a little bit unstable. So can you repeat that? You said something about us being alike, and then I kind of lost you.
Oh yeah, I was saying that me and you are alike. My father passed away in 2019, and I had literally
Okay.
just told him that year that how I wanted us to have a closer relationship, and how I
Mm,
felt like we didn't, and all those things. Um, so yeah, it does make it harder when you don't have that parent there to really model with. But we can use our
yep.
spouses, our friends. I mean, I've used
Mhm.
everybody, you know. Uh, but I felt
You're
like
like,
I
"I'm gonna
didn't.
figure this out."
Yeah, I've used everybody, like clients at work, like my supervisor, really just taking every opportunity to speak up, for what I need and what's
Mm,
important to me. So it helps.
yeah.
But I felt like I
Awesome.
didn't answer the question though, like, because you asked like ways that we can tell. Um, I always tell people to try to like step outside of yourself when you are like really activated by something and see how you're responding, right? Because it's like kids like 5 to 10, they really don't even have the they don't have the brain capacity yet to really be able to empathize or see another person's perspective. Everything is always about them. So it's like if you get in arguments with people and you're focusing a lot on you, or everything that someone does, you're assuming that it's because of you, they're doing this to you, then that's a sign that you may be like 5 to 10 years old.
Okay. This is perfect. We are learning so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, I want to kind of get on now. Can you hear me? Because I feel like my Wi Fi is totally being way unstable right now. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah, I can hear you. OMG, that was me the
Okay.
other day. It just kept going out. Like the storm just kicked it out.
I Yeah, and it's sunny as can be here, but it keeps telling me that I have an unstable connection and I just had an interview before this and everything was fine. So I don't know what's happening. Okay. Well, we're going to continue and if it we'll just see what it happens. So, you are also, and tell me if you can't hear me. Um you are also, as you said, a self-care coach, and of course this is all kind of an umbrella of self-care. This figuring out how to not be codependent, so on and so forth. So, um, something you really specialize is emotional self care. Are you here with me?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. My internet is driving me bonkers. So, my question to you is what is emotional self care and how is that different than just good old self care?
I love that. So emotional self-care is self-care related to how we take care of ourselves emotionally and also mentally, like it's about,
Mhm.
how do we speak up for ourselves when we feel like people have said something that we don't like or said something negative about us. Do we set boundaries with people? Do we say no? Are we speaking of using our words when we communicate? I feel this when you said this, it made me feel like this. Really making sure that people are not just coming in and feeling like they can walk all over us, that they can say whatever they want to us and we're not saying anything, that they can treat us any kind of way. Really making sure that you acknowledge your space here in the world and telling other people that you share space with that too.
Yeah, and so there was a quote on your Instagram that I absolutely love and I wrote down because I want you to explain this. I want you to kind of explain the quote and what it means.
Okay.
So the quote I saw was it says when you're wired to take care of others before yourself, it can become easy to lose your identity in others.
Yeah, I love
Did
that
you get
quote
that
too.
quote?
Yes, I love that quote too. It's actually on my website too. Um, I love that
Okay.
quote. One of the reasons why I wrote it is because I always like to be clear, like and if I'm writing or if I'm speaking, that is nothing that we have done wrong per se. A lot of people ask me, how did I get this way? What did I do? And we didn't do anything. I mean, what we did is we survived these really complex and challenging childhood experiences within our families. Um, but it's like in doing that, we also became just wired to take care of others, to think about others first. Most of the time, codependents and people pleasers are very vigilant of what's going on, their surroundings. We're kind of hyper vigilant almost, and all of that, is our wiring. Because at one point we had to be hyper vigilant, we had to be quiet, we had to be helpful because our parents or caregivers literally needed that support or we didn't feel safe, and all of these things are things that make up who we are now, you know. Um and it's not,
Yeah.
I love how you said like don't feel bad about it, because I don't feel bad
Mm-mm.
about it. I thank God for codependency. If I didn't have codependency, or my codependent ways. Who knows if I would have had a relationship with my mother? Who knows if I would have ever, engaged with my father? Because I was angry at my
Yeah.
father and I was hurt by my, emotionally and verbally abused by my mother. And so me standing up for
Yeah.
myself and saying, you're not going to talk to me like that, or, I could have got slapped or, killed or, abandoned. Who knows? You know?
Right. And it's really, really scary when you don't have one, your identity, two, like you struggle with self-worth anyway. So then these behaviors that people do are just like we accept them for a little bit too long because we do think they're going to abandon us or leave us, and then we'll have nothing.
Yeah,
And that's really, really scary.
it is. It
Okay.
really
My
is.
internet is driving me crazy.
Oh no, I can hear you great though. I can hear
You
you
okay,
great.
you can hear me great. I I want to see something really quick. Oh, that doesn't. No, I don't want to do that. Cuz I can hear you and then it'll be fine and then it won't be fine, and it's just really like hard to
Oh,
have a conversation when it's like delayed a little bit.
yeah, because you don't know if I'm talking
So
or
I,
not.
yeah, and I was trying to see if we could turn off the video to see if that would do anything, but I don't know. I'm going to turn off my camera to see if it does. Well, I just go away. Okay.
Oh yeah, you can't see me anymore. I
No,
turned
I
mine
can't.
off.
Yeah, I want to see if maybe this just helps for a minute, and then we can turn it back on, but to kind of like get it up to speed because I feel like there's a delay with the video. Is that okay?
Oh yeah.
Okay. And then like maybe like in a minute or so we'll turn it back on and see we'll see if it does okay. Um okay. So something else I wanted to add to the quote, and I did not even realize it was the quote you wrote the quote, which is
Yeah, I wrote
awesome.
the quote. Yeah.
Yeah. I ironically identified with it because it says, you can lose your identity in others. And when you're not setting boundaries, when you're doing all this people pleasing, it it really does become like who am I even? Who is Melissa? What what does she even like to do? Um and you tell me, like some people I guess might not know this answer, but I guess one of the fastest ways that I figured out like how to start loving myself and like to start setting boundaries is like figuring out what I value.
Right.
Um and like even if you need to Google like what are values, like what's a list of values, to see like, hey, this is who Tanisha stands for, this is who Melissa stands for. I value um not reciprocity, but like whatever it is that you value, that's how you can kind of start deciding to set boundaries. Like Tanisha, would you say that's a good like starting off point in terms of like if you how would you find your identity if you feel like you've lost it in another's?
Yeah, I actually love what you said. Like I was clapping, like you couldn't see it, but I was like, oh my God, yes, like Melissa's spot on. I would say the exact same thing. I mean, I don't even think I would add much to it except just to say, like I I think for me, healing from codependency was accepting that I didn't know who I was.
Mm.
And that honestly was the hardest part. Setting the boundaries initially I thought was hard. But when I got to a place of setting the boundaries, then it was like, okay, well, who am I? Because I'm not around the same people anymore that took advantage of me. they kind of called that kind of like directed the show, and I was just like their puppet. Um,
Yeah.
who am I? Because I realized that I didn't like my job. I didn't like the profession I chose. I didn't like I didn't like the partners I chose. Even some friends that I had, I was like, why am I friends with this person? I have nothing in common with them. Like it literally felt like cleaning up after like a little kid. That's what life
Yeah.
felt like for because I'm 39. I would say between like 34 and just like 37, 38, as I literally felt like I was cleaning up after someone. It's like I'm like, oh well, I like to write. I like to watch movies. I like to, go for walks like in the park. Why am I in a relationship with someone who goes to a 9 to 5 and then they come home and they eat and they smoke weed all night and play video games? Like I was
Mm.
really able to see like this does not match who I am anymore. Um, and so with the identity piece, that was the challenging part because it's like I let go, and we essentially, like all of us healing from codependency, is like we let go of those identities or that identity rather, that told us that we had to focus on others, and then we connect back to ourselves. But when you don't know who that is, that also feels like a very foreign place.
That is such a good point. I mean, yeah, I wrote down literally, you said you had to accept that you didn't even know who you were. And that is really scary because when you start stripping away, I'm not Tanisha, the girl that just goes and takes care of every person in my life, then it's like I return back to Tanisha, but what am I returning home to? Who am I? What do I even enjoy? But like, as much as it can be scary, it also, through doing the healing work, I'm sure you have found like, I love taking these walks and I love doing this. And I'm so glad that I get to do this now instead of what I know I would be doing if I was with X, Y, and Z or so on and so forth. But that's a very, very scary thing. And I hate to say it, but I feel like there are so many people walking around that just don't know who they are. Um, and I don't want to say it's any fault of their own, but that is absolutely their birthright, their right as a human to have their own identity and to learn who they are as a person and what they value and who they want to show up as.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I,
agree with you. I think there's a lot of people that don't know.
mm-hmm. And I mean, I just got out of a 6-year relationship, and unfortunately, I said it in my last guest that I do feel like I lost myself in that relationship, and there were so many things that I loved and I valued about myself, but I didn't get to do that or express that in that relationship. So I'm currently in that of like, who is Melissa, and I'm learning who I am as a single Melissa, but then I'm going to go and get into a relationship at some point down the road. And I just have to make sure that I stay with who I like the things I like about myself. And I don't lose that um, by dating somebody else and then get in another codependent relationship.
Right, and it can be scary. I mean, I didn't date for years. Like I didn't date for
Mm-hmm.
like 4 years, and then um I did a little bit of healing work, and I thought I thought things were good, and I ran into a narcissist, and I was with him for about 18 months, and then I was single again, and just recently I started dating again. And the shift that I'll say, which is really exciting and cool, I think the listener, you and the listeners, like will like it, is when he asked me, even though it's something really simple, I know you're gonna like relate to me when I say this. So he asked me, he said, what do you want to eat? I have a taste for steak. And I said, okay. I said, well, I could do steak. And so we got there, and he was ordering and I was ordering, and then he was like, oh, I'm wondering, like, maybe we should get this appetizer. I really like this appetizer. And it was like, I think it was like oysters or something. And I don't like oysters. And I looked at him and I was like, oh, you want to eat that? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, you should get them. And he was like, well, you're not going to eat them with me? And I was like, no, I really don't like oysters, but I think you should get them for you though. And he was like, oh, okay. And I was so scared to death. I was like, but he likes oysters. You should just eat the oysters so he feels like you like him. It was this whole battle in my mind. And I was like, but Tanisha, you don't like oysters. Like, if he doesn't want to talk
Yeah.
to you anymore because you don't like oysters, like, this is just ridiculous.
Yeah, then bye.
Right. But it's like old Tanisha would have sat there trying to eat the oysters because I would want to connect with him in that way, you know,
Mhm.
in hopes that I'm this quote unquote perfect girl in his eyes that loves steak and like oysters, and he'll want to take me out again.
Yep. Ugh. So I can absolutely relate to that. But I think your response was good, You I mean, of course you could have said I don't really like oysters, but then you also knew that he did, so you're like, "Well, if you want to get him for yourself cuz you didn't necessarily want to take that away from him either, you know?"
Right.
And I felt like that was a really good response cuz I don't even know that I would I'd probably be like, "Oh, I don't like him," and then I would probably say, "But you get him for you." I mean, at some point I would, but yeah, I can absolutely relate to that for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, let's try to turn our cameras back on. See if it works.
Okay.
Well, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
It sounds good.
It does. Okay. So, I guess one I want to ask, we've been talking about all this codependency and emotional self-care and so on and so forth, but why would you say it is so absolutely crucial to put yourself first?
I would say it's crucial to put ourselves first because we spent so many years not putting ourselves first. And I think about all the
Mhm.
challenges that I went through really alone, as a child. It makes me want to put myself first even more because I'm like, this is a part of our birthright, as human beings. It's like you're supposed to think about yourself first because even if you have a family, if you're not okay, your family's not going to be okay. So it's like saying that we can take care of ourselves later, whether it be like a doctor's appointment or getting our hair cut or sleep or eat or rest, we're putting the people that we love at risk. It's like, are we really giving them quality care if we're not caring for ourselves?
That is so spot on. And then like we become like we kind of just become the shell of a person if we're not putting ourselves first. Like once again we slowly like start to lose our identity because that's like how people can slip back into the codependency if we're not putting ourselves first, because then you're like, "Oh, I'll just take care of my son's this and my daughter's this and my husband's that," and then lo and behold, you haven't even done anything for yourself in the last week and it's easy. So I just can't stress enough that it's not selfish to put yourself first. It's actually crucial so you can show up best to yourself and to other people in your life.
Yes,
But I know
absolutely.
people struggle with it.
Yeah, I 100%
Oh, my
agree.
internet is driving me crazy.
Oh, can you hear me? I can hear you
Okay,
good.
I can hear you. The video is driving me nuts.
Oh, okay.
But we'll get there. I just have like a couple more questions. So, if we are not used to putting ourselves first, what would you say to my listeners would be some small steps that they can take today that are practical to start putting themselves first?
So the first thing I would say is, try your best to accept that this is your new reality. Accepting that there's been moments where you haven't put yourself first, you know, because when we accept it, that's when we can build awareness around it, and you can start to notice
Yeah.
more like, did I do something for me today? Try to do at least one thing for yourself every single day. One technique that I
Yep.
always tell people to use is, for the week or even for the day, for the week, if it's, helps, like write down every single thing that you want to do and need to do
Mm.
for yourself. And then just put two down every single day, and get those things accomplished. That way you're building a routine of every moment of the day you're doing something for you. It's like whether it's like
Yes.
getting your favorite food or, setting a boundary with a friend. It's like you're inserting yourself, every day. Um, so that's
Yep.
one. Then another one I would say is start to spend time with yourself because that's how we build the relationship. And I know that can be really hard. I always encourage people to try like 1 hour, maybe 3 or 4 times a week to start, because I know it can
Mhm.
be kind of like, what am I supposed to be
Yeah.
doing right now? you know,
Oh,
uh, start off
I
a little.
love it. I love spending time by myself. So it makes you so self-aware. Like I love spending time by myself. So I think that's a great tip.
Yeah, it really
It's a
does,
good tip.
and then try to increase it to
Yep.
2 or 3 hours out by yourself doing something you like to do. And then the next step is try to take half of a day to yourself. Get up, take your shower, groom yourself how you like, have a nice breakfast or brunch or something, and then take yourself somewhere. It's like spend all day to yourself. It's really fun.
Yes. It is. It is. I love it. I used to take myself out to a Mexican restaurant all the time. I mean, I went there more times by myself than I ever took with people. And I people are like, "You can go to restaurants by yourself?" And I'm like, "Yeah. Well, you can't?" Yes. It's great. It's great.
It really is. Yeah, I love
All
it.
right. It is. Well, Tanisha, this about wraps up our time. But before we go, I want you to just mention people where they can find your work and also mention your book that you have again.
Yes, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube under TJ Self Care. Then go to my website, tjselfcare.com. I have free resources there. I have a free guide to end people pleasing. I also have my book. I have a webinar, and I have a lot of the podcast links. So my podcast, Heal, Pray, Grow. Um, you can check it out. It's solo podcast. I'm gonna have people come on soon, but for now, it's mainly solo episodes. Um, and my book, When Depression and Anxiety Have a Voice, you can find it on Amazon, anywhere you shop for your books, or on my website, tjselfcare.com.
Perfect, perfect. And then also all of those notes, all those links that she just said. Also, if you go to my website, thebrightsideoflifepodcast.com, on her particular episode, it will also, if you click on guest, it has all of those links right there also to make it nice and easy for all you listeners to be able to find that stuff. And then, Tanisha, I have one last question that I always ask all my guests. And that question would be, in your own words, what does the bright side of life mean to you?
Oh, I love the bright side of life means means loving myself and taking every day to enjoy living. and not existing.
Oh, yes. Living and not existing. I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for coming on here to share everything. I have learned a lot, and this episode was wonderful. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Melissa, for having me. It's been great.